Well, so far we have used Adobe Animate to create our animations and to explore the principles of animation. Here's an example of a project from our last assignment, Jack's Jerky, by Sabrina Hoke, one of your classmates, and it's very creative, very well done. And you might be wondering, what's going on under the hood? What makes all of this work? And why are we starting with Adobe Animate, formerly Flash, to explore web animation? Well, let's talk about in general what web animation is and how it works. The Web Animation API is the main driver, an engine behind everything that happens within your browser in terms of facilitating animation. The Web Animations API, or WAPI as it's sometimes called, provides developers access to the browser's animation engine, and it describes how animation on DOM elements should be implemented across browsers. It lets developers construct animations and control their playback using CSS animations, CSS transitions, and JavaScript. And when WAPI, or the Web Animations API, is working in this mode, this is sometimes called the retain mode. There's a second mode that is utilized primarily by Adobe Animate. And Adobe Animate uses the Canvas element and JavaScript and the Create.js library to dynamically generate and render animations just like you see playing here in this page. The Canvas element is part of HTML5 and allows for dynamic, scriptable rendering of 2D and 3D shapes and images. It provides an empty graphic zone on which specific JavaScript APIs interact with the browser and create the 2D and 3D using WebGL, graphics, and animations. This is sometimes called the intermediate mode. And there's some major differences between how the browser handles the retain mode and the intermediate mode. And there's a nice video that I want you to take a look at after this video that sort of explain those modes. But as we progress from this point in the semester, we're going to start taking a closer look at HTML5 Canvas and how it works, the basics of Canvas, along with our exploration of Adobe Animate. So, here's an example of what's happening within the Canvas element, but not in this particular animation, something much more simple. Here we have a simple page that's utilizing Canvas that I put together in CodePen, and I'm utilizing some code that's available on the Mozilla developers website under the topics of Canvas API. Now, Canvas, as you can see in the HTML pane, is a simple element. It's a block element, plain old block element, HTML element, and here we can see that this element is assigned the identifier Canvas. And that's important because what we're going to do is we're going to access the Canvas element via this identifier. And what happens between this opening tag here and this closing tag, everything that happens in between here is what Canvas will do in terms of rendering the object in the page, and then later, as we'll see in the coming weeks, the animation. And we don't have any CSS here just to keep it simple, because I talked about the intermediate mode, that most of the heavy lifting in the intermediate mode is done via JavaScript. But Canvas in the intermediate mode is really doing a lot of the work that the Web Animation API would do. And so if we look at this JavaScript, I know some of you haven't taken it, GDS 89, but this is very straightforward. What we need to do is target or reference the Canvas element in the web page here. And so we create a container using JavaScript, and we essentially create a constant or a variable that we call Canvas, and it's using the document.getElementById method to basically target and store reference to this canvas element that's in the web page. See, this identifier is the same argument that we're using in this method. And so what that does is it accesses everything within the page from the opening canvas tag to the closing canvas tag. And this next statement basically tells the browser to render in 2D. And so the canvas dot get context method will essentially tells the browser that, hey, we're working in 2D, and we set that another variable, ctx, or a constant, to that value. So we're targeting, we're setting the context and making sure that we're telling the browser that this is 2D. And then after that, we, with Canvas, will have to draw our object and then later animate it. And so here, this next statement sets the rectangle color to green, and it fills the green. So here you see we have this object, and now we set the property object ctx dot fill style, which is the property, to the color green. And finally, this last statement here in Canvas sets the rectangle position in terms of where it sits within the canvas element. And so it's setting, or should I say the canvas tag, it's setting that rectangle position to the top left-hand corner of the page at the position of 10 pixels and 10 pixels, and it sets the size to 150 by 100. And you can see that, and that looks pretty straightforward here. Again, the object, setting the rectangle, fill or rectangle position to these coordinates, and setting this width and height. And so if you haven't taken any JavaScript courses, hopefully you understand that. It's pretty straightforward. And then you would also utilize JavaScript and methods like setting timeout and setting the amount of time that you want this thing to say for animate across the screen. And we'll take a look at that a little bit later. What I would like you to do and recommend is that you go to W3 Schools and take a quick look at the Canvas tutorial with an introduction to Canvas. You can work through drawing in Canvas, which shows kind of what we did here, working with coordinates, and get about as far as you can that you understand. There are some exercises where you try it yourself, and this will kind of put you in tune with and understanding how Adobe Animate is working. And then later, as you learn more HTML and JavaScript, you can springboard forward through to basically coding your own animations using HTML5 Canvas and even the Create.js library, this animation library, or some other library on your own. And you can see this is a pretty simple page. Let's go back to Sabrina's page and let's inspect the page. So I'll right click and I'll inspect the element, and that brings up the developer tools. And now this looks much more complex, as you can see right away. What you will see though is that we have that canvas element and gives it the ID canvas and sets the width and height of her animate movie. This is the same width and height that you set in your project. And as well, doing a little bit with some inline styles and setting the position of the object and the canvas element. This is one of the things that I don't particularly like about Adobe Animate, but it's functional. We can see the CSS working here in the styles pane. If we expand the head of the document, we can see that Animate is pointing to the Create.js library. In fact, that it's pointing to a CDN, which is called a Content Development Network, where the library gives us all of the scripting that we need to support and create this animation. More CSS, And then, if as you can see here, a specific link to a JavaScript file that again gets output by Adobe Animate, and then more JavaScript that's embedded in the head of the document. Now, this is all pretty complex stuff, right? We point to the library, and then this will fine tune and basically utilize and point to those aspects of the library that it needs to accomplish the animation. You don't have to worry about understanding all of this because most of this is done for you in Adobe Animate. And so hence you can see the benefit of using a tool like Adobe Animate to develop simple animations that you can use in your web pages. If you have any questions, post your questions to the questions forum. Please make sure that you watch the video that comes immediately after this video, and I'll look forward to hearing from you this week.